Try to get you out of here early so you can get home to your football games or whatever else we got going on this afternoon, this evening. Dr. Evans, we appreciate you and your crew coming back. And I think we've met all of your crew. And if we haven't met them or they won't talk, introduce them so we know who they are as well, if you don't mind. But Dr. Evans, we'll turn it over to you and let you begin. Thank you so much.
There we go. Now we're good. I'm loud, but I didn't think I was as loud as I normally am on the mic. So thank you so much again for allowing us to be here. I appreciate your being here early in the morning to get us rolling. So yesterday, you heard us talk about much of the progress that Mississippi has made over the last 10 plus years. Today, you'll hear about the work ahead of, and as well as the priority areas that we need your support in order for us to continue to move Mississippi forward. Today, you'll hear about key academic initiatives, how we plan to address the chronic absenteeism issues that we have in our state, our work to support low-performing schools and districts, how we plan on integrating workforce development through the K-12 experience, teacher pay, student as well as district-led initiatives, district audits, and many of the other positive things that we have in store for Mississippi school districts. As a matter of fact, one of the initiatives that you very graciously funded last year, our synchronous learning platform that we have up and running, we had a meeting from 10 to 10:45 this morning about expanding it. So we've already been working this morning with some of these initiatives that you were very kindly funded. So we're going to start off the day with Miss Wendy Clemens. She is our Chief Academic Officer.
All right, good morning. I want to start out by thanking you for your time yesterday afternoon, your questions. They were very insightful. We took copious notes and have been even working between the hours of last evening and this morning to try to garner some of those responses for you. Also want to thank you for your support for some of the key initiatives and priorities that we believe will continue to have positive outcomes for our students and therefore our state. All right. So the key initiatives and priorities that I plan on talking about for a minute this morning is an adolescent literacy initiative that we are proposing. I know yesterday we had some discussions about NAEP scores. And although, we are doing well in ELA and math with the NAEP scores in fourth grade, sometimes in eighth grade, we see a falling off of that. We also want to talk about our mathematics initiative. We currently do receive some funding for mathematics, but we would like to expand our math initiative, particularly in grades 2 through 6, and we'll talk about that. Our early childhood education programs. We updated you a great deal yesterday about those programs and the success that we're having with the numbers of students participating and the quality of the programs. So I'll briefly talk to that. And then, of course, the issue of chronic absenteeism in our state. I've talked to Dr. Evans many, many times, and in all honesty, I maybe should put chronic absentee first, because if you can't get the students there, everything else will not be received, if you will. All right, so we're going to start with adolescent literacy. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see what I've prepared up here. Nationally, 30% of eighth graders performed at or above the NAEP proficiency in reading in 2024. That's a national percentage. That same year, MAP scores indicated that 47.8% of Mississippi students performed at or above proficiency in reading, with the percentage of students performing at or above proficiency in reading dropping from 2023. So we understand and highlight that is an area where we need support for our students. Structured literacy beyond third grade is essential because many students are not proficient readers and they still struggle with reading as text grows more complex. What happens in many cases is that when a child leaves the third grade and they go into the fourth grade, and particularly the fifth grade, it becomes an issue in the classroom of we're not teaching the child to read the complex text. We are having the child read something for understanding. It becomes very topic oriented. And so we know that as these texts become more complex, that our students they still do have some deficiencies. And so we would take the structured literacy model that we use with K-3 students, and we would adapt that to teachers and students in grades 4-8. We believe it's important because it will close the skill gap, support struggling readers, including those with dyslexia diagnoses. And we believe that it's important that we teach advanced decoding and vocabulary in order for students to read and comprehend, use and implement what it is that they're reading. The Adolescent Literacy Initiative is a supportive arm of MDE designed to provide support for students in grades 4-8 with extensions into grades 9-12 for students who continue to demonstrate difficulty with foundational reading and writing skills. So we understand that 4-8 is going to be the target. That's going to be the focus. But we also have students in 9-12 who need these supports. And so even though this is considered an adolescent literacy initiative, we also want you to understand that it will have an impact on professional development for teachers in grades 9-12. So what we are currently doing, actually this school year, we're conducting a pilot. We've got 3 school districts. And the pilot basically is us working to implement the instructional supports that we are requesting in the adolescent literacy legislation. And like I said, it's a small pilot. It's 3 districts in southern and central and northern part of the state. This pilot includes general education teachers as well as teachers who work with students with disabilities. Okay, so we're piloting it both with general ed teachers and those that teach our special needs students. And what it includes is teachers, both general education, special education, dyslexia therapists, interventionists, and administration. The training that we're doing with them is grounded in the science of reading to support students with reading difficulties, multilingual students, and students with characteristics of or diagnoses of dyslexia. And then again, even in these pilots, we are including teachers of grades 9-12 as well. It includes department vetted assessment system. And what I mean by assessment system, I don't mean an additional test. I mean universal screeners, diagnostic screeners, and formative and summative assessments. Again, we talked yesterday about the importance of data leading our decisions and our actions. And that is no different in the classroom. Okay, so you've got to be able to screen and determine where those basic needs are so that you can apply there. We have job embedded coaching, very similar to what we've done in our K-3 initiative. It's for teachers of grades 4-8. And we are targeting teachers because in 4th grade, more and more, you're already seeing departmentalization rather than self-contained classrooms. So we are going to focus on our English language arts teachers. We are going to focus on our science teachers. And we're also going to include our social science or social studies teachers, okay? And really train them on how to recognize the deficiencies. And then what do you do in your content area, teaching what you're expected to teach, but at the same time growing these students and helping them become better readers so that they can digest complex text. We also are planning with this initiative, we're also working with our education preparation programs. Again, I mentioned yesterday that in K-3 literacy, as well as mathematics, we always try to do a two-front system where we're working with our in-service teachers, but at the same time, we're working with our pre-service teachers so that we get bang for our buck. So in the 2026-27 school year, pending legislation that would be approved, MDE looks to expand adolescent literacy training throughout the state. Again, we'll have the school-based coaching model. We will have science of reading training, both for teachers who receive the coaching as well as teachers who don't receive coaching. We'll have school level on-site training for teachers and interventionists, dyslexia therapists. This approach, we believe, is going to help all students access grade level content, succeed academically, and then hopefully our goal is that they develop lifelong literacy skills. Reading proficiency is the objective and is essential because it underpins success in school across all subjects. And then quite honestly, after graduation and when you go into the real world. So that is what we are recommending as it relates. Now, this in no way impacts the Literacy-Based Promotion Act. We are going to continue to work there. But this is additionally, I think when I thought about it and we were talking about this, you know, we have these supports for students up until the 3rd grade. And then they go to the 4th grade and they may be departmentalized. And then they don't have the reading supports and the texts are becoming more complex. And so then we wonder, well, why are 8th graders not scoring like our 3rd graders? Well, they too need supports, okay? Because they're not going to read the materials they read in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, okay? So that is our proposal for adolescent literacy. All right. So the next one we want to talk about is, and of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, and I think this is kind of why we're here, so I don't even know if I have to say it. But in order to implement an adolescent literacy initiative, we will need your support both in legislation as well as funding. We believe that we can actually do the adolescent initiative probably more efficiently or a little bit cheaper than even our K-3 initiative, but it is going to require resources to implement it. Okay, in mathematics, I want to first highlight that since January of 2023, with the legislative funding support, the MDE has provided mathematics coaching and professional development supports to districts in Mississippi. Our coaching supports are populated, the schools are populated based on the lowest performing schools on our MAP assessments, and we evaluate those scores over a 2-year period, not just the last year, but a combined 2-year period. In this, we talked about high quality instructional material yesterday. We did focus a lot on literacy, but as I said yesterday, we also have adoptions in mathematics. Building teacher capacity in the standards of mathematical practices. And what a lot of our teachers do not understand, that in mathematics, yeah, there are standards. Like I mentioned yesterday, a kindergartner, they need to be able to count 1 to 100. But in the standards, we also have the standards for mathematical practices. And that's really about the application of mathematics. That's about the concrete use of mathematics. It's not about the memory or the rote memory of being able to do a math problem. It's the true application. And in some of our classrooms, unfortunately, we don't get there. We get to the let's teach the standard. So we've had a huge effort there. Also, effective mathematical practices, what those look like in the classroom. And then big time, we talked about this, training administrators on how best support teachers through the use of a document that we developed called the mathematics instructional observation protocol, so that when a administrator goes into a room, they understand what it is that they're supposed to be seeing. What is student engagement? What is student learning? And so that's kind of what we've been working with. House Bill 1613 allocated about $5 million for the specific implementation of math coaches, aligned to the MDE coaching model. And through these efforts, the Division of Mathematics of Coaching was created. We've trained and supported 25 mathematics coaches in line with the coaching model. Supported over 80 plus schools across the state with direct coaching supports. Hosted four regional training sessions in each school year and for approximately 400 teachers and leaders. Hosted the first ever MDE math specific conference. And then we've also implemented, some of you may have heard of LCAM, which is the Literacy Coaching Academy. We also have a Math Coaching Academy. And so every year we have a cohort of district coaches or math coaching leaders or teacher leaders that we put through a rigorous professional development opportunity that helps them become better at their craft. Okay. For the current school year, our coaching supports do continue, but looking ahead, the MDE is requesting your support to expand coaching supports and advance statewide mathematics initiatives. And some of that includes the development of an educator in residence program and the addition of a math instructional specialist to strengthen instructional leadership. The educator residence program, I talked to you about that yesterday. It was kind of birthed out of the need to get literacy coaches, and it is expanded and been a wonderful thing. I will say that math is a little different than literacy. When we got initial funding to hire math coaches, you have to understand that when we hire a math coach, okay, they are a math teacher. And when we hire them, we are taking them out of the classroom. And we don't have an abundance of mathematics teachers. So it just, there's a different dynamic to mathematics. And so we've got to be creative. And one of the ways that we're going to do this is we're going to look at retired teachers who have retired, and we can approach them one of two ways. We can hire more part-time, because typically a coach will serve anywhere to 2 to 3 schools. So we could hire a retired teacher part-time, and then we just have to hire more of them, and they might serve one school because they're doing it part-time. So we're looking at that. Man, we're recruiting in every border state we can, just pulling them in there. Quite honestly, if they're good at their craft, we'll take them from a non-public school. You know, we're just trying to find that capacity in mathematics. The efforts will also support implementation of a numeracy legislation. I know we talked a little bit about that yesterday. I think Alabama's numeracy. K2 screeners in mathematics so that we can identify early where the weaknesses are, deficiencies, and intervene early. A pre-K to kindergarten building block crosswalk to ensure alignment across early learning. That what the students are receiving in the pre-K programs aligns perfectly to what we're doing in K-12. While expanding professional learning opportunities for grades 7 through 12, and then refining the 5th grade assessment to better measure student growth and readiness. Now, when I say that, one of the things that we've talked about is that when those students leave the 5th grade and they're going into 6th grade or what we identify as middle school, it's very important that we know how they fare when it comes to algebraic thinking. Okay. And so what we're talking about is not like a 3rd grade gate. That's not what we're talking about. But we are talking about an assessment or screener that allows students when they leave 5th grade and they go into 6th grade, they go with the understanding and the teacher's understanding of where their deficiencies may lie. 8th grade mathematics, a lot of people want to say, well, the 8th grade mathematics teachers aren't doing what they're supposed to do. Well, it's not necessarily that. It's just they're getting students that may not have the foundational skills they need in order to be successful in 8th grade math. I think.
In these K2 screeners, are you also kind of training when you do the trainings how to spot the dysgraphia?
Mhm.
Because
Yes,
I've
ma'am.
read that's very under.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We are. And yeah, and that's a passion for me because that's me. So yes, ma'am, definitely. We really have worked extremely hard, both in the math as well as that adolescent literacy to make sure that dysgraphia, dyslexia, they're all embedded in there so that, I mean, as these coaches are in there, identify where it doesn't matter why the deficiency's there, it's there, and we need to address it. It's a good question.
Senator Blunt has a question for you, ma'am. You recommend.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Other than the fact that there is not a 3rd grade math test, what are the differences between your literacy efforts and training and instructional materials and coaches and math, both from K to 3 literacy versus math and 3 through 6 or 3 through 8?
Yeah.
But what structurally, how are they different from one another?
Well, systemically, they look the same on paper. The coaching model is the coaching model. However, they're 2 different beasts. And I mentioned earlier that mathematics teachers are not as easy to come by. So the 2 things that I would say that differentiate the literacy versus the math is that because there's not an abundance of mathematics teachers, 3 years ago, we took the approach that if we can't find them within the state, then we will bid it out and try to find a vendor that can provide us some supports. And I'm gonna be honest with you, we were not pleased with that. And that's why we have reassessed and we're going to find innovative ways to get our good teachers, possibly retired, who's not currently in the classroom, and we're going to put them in these positions. The second thing, with that caveat, I don't know that we will initially at least have the ability to provide the capacity in mathematics coaching as we might in literacy coaching. Our goal next year in the K-3 literacy is to get back to the number of 80 coaches, okay? Within mathematics, we're hoping that within maybe a 4-year period, we would be to the capacity of maybe 50, hopefully 60 mathematics coaches.
And I heard a lot yesterday about the science of reading, and y'all have done a lot of that, and y'all going back 20 or 30 years to the Barksdale Reading Institute and all the work that's been done about reading and this. How, tell me where we are in the science of learning math and whether we're as confident in the instructional materials and the teaching methods that are used in math as opposed to reading.
Yeah, that too is a twofold answer. Dr. Evans has us involved in many cross-state collaboratives. And what we're learning is there is no quote science of math. You know, we've met with other states that are dealing with numeracy legislation. It's just not the silver bullet, if you will, you know? So we are all talking about like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? However, I will say this, I am very confident in the strategies that we are using to help improve math instruction because we are focusing on those mathematical practices, teaching students the mathematical practices. We are focusing on what is quality instruction as it was related to mathematics. And then we're also helping administrators understand what that looks like so that they can continue to grow that. So I think that the 3 levels that we're working with, I think that's powerful. But I'm going to be honest, we do not have a science of math that we can utilize like we did with literacy. Okay. All right. So I want to talk just briefly about early childhood. I did spend some time yesterday talking about our growth and our success. As the map shows, in the 40 early learning collaboratives, there are over 6,700 children. They're being served by 380, it was served in 380 classrooms. So if you do the math there, we have 16 coaches. So that puts us 24 teachers to every 1 coach is our ratio. And the ideal ratio would be 15 to 1. The same is true in SIP, our SIP programs, our state invested pre-K programs. A little bit different. We've got a 17 to 1 ratio there. But now our coaches that we're hiring with in the SIP program, many of them are contractual, many of them are part-time. And so even though it might look like it's a 17 to 1 ratio teacher to coach, because they're part-time, they cannot coach as many classrooms and teachers. So the bottom line, as we continue our efforts in early childhood, is our goal is to decrease the ratios of coach to teachers. Now we've been innovative. We've trained in every possible scenario. We still do face-to-face. We do coaching. We do virtual. We do hybrid. We are using the resources we have, I think, in a very efficient way. But in order to meet that ideal 1 to 15 ratio, we would need additional funding and additional positions. We are about, like I said, we're doing some contractual because we don't have the pins. But we would need probably about 34 positions or pins in order to meet the ratio in both our early learning collaborative as well as our state invested pre-K programs. So that's the concern. we don't want to plateau. We don't want to stop growing, and we certainly don't want to stop the quality of the program. And so we feel like it was important to bring that up and talk about that.
Recognize Senator Wiggins for a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And looking at the chart, to your point, seems to me to find a place you start is to eliminate duplicative things. The fact of the matter is, when I look at that chart, I see 2 programs. And yesterday, we heard tremendous success of the collaboratives and the high quality and everything like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that the SIP program is not in statute. That's more of an agency with funding from the legislature.
I think it is in it's in.
Is it in statute?
Oh, it's in the appropriation,
Right, it's in the appropriation bill, which on the collaborative, y'all talked about yesterday, the benchmarks that we are top 5 in the country, that's been written into the statute. And I will comment that when I went to a number of places, one of those being Petal, which is one of the top places, and I asked, why are these being successful? They looked me in the face and said, because y'all put it in statute. And they said, and what we saw yesterday was, by the data, there is a natural tendency to go to the path of least resistance. And so my concern is that in the SIP program, we don't necessarily have the high quality that we've been talking about for 2 days. So I'm not saying it's bad by any means, and I think we're great to be there. But if we're looking for efficiencies and better ratios, then would it make sense to combine them? And then my other question is, is it a possibility to take the SIP and just convert them in some way to the collaboratives?
Yeah, I think so. I will tell you this. I know that the early learning collaboratives, through the legislation you speak of, has more requirements, which provides a greater amount of quality and consistency. Okay. And with the state invested pre-K, those parameters are looser, if you will. And we have at the department level, because they're all competitive, we've got SIP, actually we've got one coming out in spring of 2026, a competitive process for becoming or getting a state invested pre-K program. But we have, in that competitive process, we add quality points or bonus points for those who apply for a state invested pre-K program if they include some of the components that aren't required here that are required here. And we've gotten a little pushback on that. But to your point, if we know that this is quality, these outcomes are what we want and what we desire, then it would stand to reason that we would want our state invested pre-K programs to model that, to have those same qualifiers. I don't know why we couldn't convert them. We would just have to make sure that if we do that, that those 33 current state invested pre-K programs understand that by transferring over the early learning collaborative, there are, for lack of a better word, rules and consistencies that are expected,
So are you saying that in the SIP, I kind of heard you say that it's more broader and not as many, I guess, things or whatever. Is that because in those areas, they felt like they couldn't meet that collaborative? And so at least they're able to do early childhood in those areas through the SIP program,
Yeah,
which I would argue is better than certainly nothing.
nothing, right. I will say, I'll give you one example. One of the things that the state invested pre-K programs quote doesn't require, but we made it bonus points, is the collaboration with Head Start.
Oh, I wasn't going to bring that up, but since you did.
Oh, but anyway, so
Well-
we have put that in as, because here's the bottom line, those students are coming to your doors.
But let's talk about that
Mhm.
because I think it's relevant because when the collaborative was done, it was an amendment was put on the floor that you had to cooperate with Head Start. The politics of early childhood, why we never got here in the first place
Mhm.
for decades, was because of the politics of early childhood. We didn't want to play nice with each other in the sandbox. And what I've heard, Bryce Wiggins, is that there are places in this state who don't want to work with Head Start. And that's a problem because when you look at the high quality and the requirement of the collaboration, we want to raise all our children up.
So,
And is anything I said wrong?
I, I will say this. I do think there is some truth to what you're saying. I think with everything, you go into some areas and you've got a wonderful Head Start program. I mean, they're fantastic. And then you might go in other areas and it's just,
But let's be clear, the Collaborative Act passed, it would not have passed without
Without-
support of Head Start. And
That's
Head
correct.
Start understood that
That's
by
right.
doing the collaborative, we were going to raise the bar, create high standards for Head Start.
that's right. That's-
And all the Head Start folks. And so it concerns me that that's in the SIP program, that's one of the issues that prevent or that is not done. And, again, something is better than nothing. And these are why we're having these hearings to get into that.
To,
So,
yeah.
but if you want to comment more on that, since you brought it up.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I feel like as a former K-6 building level principal, I work very closely with my local Head Start. And sometimes the relationship was frustrating and sometimes it was hunky dory. It was great. But that's with everything. That's, but the mentality has always been, and I think Dr. Dent, who would agree with me, is that as a K-6 administrator, I know that those children are coming to my doors. So if I don't want to work with Head Start in the pre-K program, that doesn't behoove me in the long run. So that's my mentality. That's the way I've always thought about it. Is it sometimes a struggle? Yeah, it can be, but dealing with other entities that, send students to our schools can be complicated too. So I don't, I do personally, through my experiences, support the collaboration with Head Start.
And the point of the whole collaboratives in the SIP is to prepare children for kindergarten readiness, because we have the assessment.
That's correct.
And so I guess what you're saying is whether it's Head Start or others, they're all feeding into the same kindergartens / elementary schools.
Mhm.
So why not have a consistency, if you will?
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You can add, yeah.
I had one thing, so I'm sorry. So to
You wanna-
to incentivize everything you're talking about, right? SIP program.
Could you go to the mic, Dr. Evans? please?
Yeah.
To incentivize everything that we're talking, the reasons why we're talking about the collaboration now in the SIP program. The districts that participate in SIP those that did not show the clear connection with the collaboration with our, thank you, Head Starts, pre-K was in my head, I'm sorry. Head Starts did not receive their full request. And as well as those who had received the full request in the past did not receive their full ask if they did not show their collaboration with our Head Start.
Oh, you're saying in the SIP program, if they didn't collaborate, they didn't receive. their
Even though it was not, we are incentive, we are pushing
Right.
pushing that. Yes, sir.
And that's what I was talking about with those bonus points, because they're judged on a scale and that then determines how much funding they receive. Well, one of the big things we ask you to do is collaborate with Head Start. So if you don't, then you don't get any of those points, which reduces any funding that you would get through the SIP model.
Okay.
And that's just something we created and put into the RFP because we too understand the importance of that collaboration.
Well, and I don't want to be, that brings it back to the question. I mean, would if we're looking at government efficiencies, is one program and we accomplish all with one better than two? I mean, I would answer that question as a yes. So, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wiggins. Senator Bryan for a question.
Well, before I ask what I'm really trying to find out about, it looks to me like Monroe County is on the list of places that has a collaborative, but it doesn't seem to have a pyramid. Could somebody just look into that and see what's going on?
Yes, sir. I will
Uh,
duly noted.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding, at least originally, the collaboratives required a certain amount of state income tax credits to operate. Is that still the case?
I believe it is. Nothing's changed, yes.
And I believe they were required to operate with a private daycare provider. Is that still the case?
I'll let Senator Wiggins answer that.
Nobody is required to operate with they could if they want to, but nobody is required to.
To operate with a private,
If they want to, under the structure that we passed back then, and it's not changed, nobody is required to, but if a private child care center wants to be part of the collaborative, they can do so.
and they can do so if the collaborative agrees?
I don't know. I don't know if there's an agreement, but that as if the creation of the collaborative, they can be part of that. Yes.
Well, I'd just like to talk about the funding, first of all. I was at a meeting in Amory with one of the individuals who is active in this current organization, which dares to call itself Mississippi First. I'm in this legislature because of the real Mississippi First, and it is a constant, ongoing outrage for this crowd to dare to use that name. But there was an individual there to explain income tax credits. And when she got through explaining income tax credits, I was almost to the point that I didn't understand them anymore. But this is what you have to do. You have to go out and find somebody with enough state income tax liability to participate. And state income taxes in Mississippi have always been so low. We've historically been just the lowest reliance on sales tax, the lowest maximum bracket, and on and on. So it's difficult to find people with enough state income tax liability to provide the tax credits, unless there is any mistake about how this works. The way a tax credit works is if you owe the state of Mississippi $1,000 in state income tax, you don't pay the state of Mississippi. You write a $1,000 check to some other thing and tell the state of Mississippi, you're not getting my $1,000. I've sent it to Joe over here. It is functionally the same thing as an appropriation. It just requires enormous amounts of paperwork. And so it's always struck me as odd that we would fund this through something as difficult as an income tax credit. But I was at a national meeting, and the same individual that explained the income tax credits, or at least tried to in Amory, was there up on the stage cackling and giggling, and along with a recently elected House member who was up there cackling and giggling about how this was passed because the state legislature didn't understand how it worked. And I was tacky enough to stand up and say, well, I understand how it worked. But apart from my obvious outrage about this situation, I seriously question what the advantage is of having all this time and effort and energy spent on trying to come up with the state income tax credits. And I observe that the same crowd that is in the House that's been anxious to abolish the income tax now realizes we have all these tax credits to send money to private schools, which is one of their obvious goals. And realizing now they're going to abolish the income tax, they've started saying, well, you can have a tax credit. If you don't have any income tax liability, you can do the same thing with your property taxes and your car tax. Well, of course, that's not state money. So that's required the state to come up with some convoluted thing where the state of Mississippi writes a check to the county and the city and the school, whoever, to reimburse them from the lost property taxes. And I would just say, Mr. Chairman, I don't see how it's in anybody's best interest to have all these cumbersome funding mechanisms. And my guess is that one advantage of the SIP program is you just have whatever participation the state's going to have is with state funds, and that's that. And so my question is, I'm trying to figure out what term Senator Wiggins said. Did I say anything wrong? Was that, it seemed to be a mighty, it seemed to
my
be
answer
a
is
mighty
yes.
good question. And I hate to say, have I said anything wrong? Because I know the answer to that. But at any rate, that's my understanding. And personally, I think that the focus on pre-K is good. I think Senator Wiggins is exactly right when he says that one of the obstacles we've had is the competition among which Boy Scout it is that's going to help the little old lady across the street. And maybe you put up with a lot to try to overcome that just so we can all start moving together. But
May I comment, Mr. Chairman? To answer your question, did you say something wrong? I would say, yes, I think there is a misunderstanding in your explanation of the quote tax credit, because it is not, the collaboratives are not funded by the tax credit. It is I call it a bonus. It's a public-private partnership. The state legislature funds the collaboratives just like it funds the SIPs. The tax credit is an incentive to allow private individuals to support education if they so choose. It's been proven to be a tremendous help to bringing funds that probably otherwise would not go to these locations. The numbers are there and the data's there. Now, we can have this isn't the finance committee where we have a discussion about tax credits versus appropriations, but the fact that it's funded by tax credits, that is not accurate. And, you know, if you're asking, we should fund at the $5,000 level, every single one of those under the SIP and that, hey man, I'm all for it. Let's do it. But under our budget constraints and things that we have, I'm not sure that we can do that for 73 in that. And plus, there are corporations and individuals and businesses who love to support education through that program. And it's been a success. And I don't know who was talking in Amory or whatever, but
take a while, kid.
okay, I do understand. But it is not funded by tax credits.
Give you a 30-second response there, Senator Bryan.
Well, I suppose I should have said it's partially funded by tax credits. But first of all, that means every penny of these tax credits comes out of the state general fund. And by the way, for the rest of my career in this legislature, anybody talks about budgetary restraints and not having money, I'm going to get out the roll call for the income tax abolition, including the 20% of the Democrats that voted for it. And we're going to talk about that income tax cut. Don't tell me you ain't got money. You've got so much money, billions of dollars that we don't need in the state general fund. And we're going to abolish the state income tax and we'll all live happily ever after. I promise you, I'm talking about this as long as I have breath. But the money comes out of the Treasury. The local people are not putting their money into it. They have the ability to put the state's money into it. They are the Appropriations Committee. They are the legislature. They're taking money out of the general fund and send it to certain school districts, not based on need, not based on quality, not based on anything other than who is it locally that will participate in the tax credit scheme.
Okay. We're going to pivot and we're going to turn to Senator Boyd for a question.
Quick question. In going back to the SIPs, there's been a lot of confusion about these programs, but let me make sure these programs still are using the same high quality instructional materials, which is one of the reasons that our pre-K program is successful where others haven't been across the country. And tell me, what are the other similarities? High quality instructional materials, what else?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, we meet the benchmarks in the SIP, and we're talking up here, 14 of the 33 SIP do partner. They run as a early learning collaborative. So they could just transition over to an early learning collaborative. And then we would have to work with the other half of them to do that.
Mr. Chairman, one more question. But one of the reasons, if I understood this and I remember this, and you can kind of look at hot spots on this map where you
Mhm.
see more SIPs, is Head Starts run differently across the state. They serve different populations. Some of
Mhm.
them maybe only serve birth through 3. They run differently across the state. So in some places that model was difficult. And that's a reason they couldn't apply for the early learning collaborative and why the SIP was a welcome relief to them. Is that not correct? That's what I kind of understood. That maybe some of them weren't able to partner because those Head Start centers ran so differently across the state.
That is.
Speak
Oh.
into the microphone for us, please. Tell me who you are. And then-
Hi, I'm Jill Dent. I'm the director of the Office of Early Childhood at the department. So yes, that is, we have had experiences like that. In the Head Start grantee world in Mississippi now, there have been changes that have occurred with grantees throughout the state. We have been in conversation with those grantees, the new grantees throughout the state, and we feel like the landscape is changing. So I don't anticipate there being as much conflict that there has been before. So I'm hopeful that that's going to change. Yes, it's becoming less of a problem.
Thank you, Senator Boyd. Dr. Beckford.
Thank you. I have to bring up the big guns occasionally, guys. All right, so let's move on to a fun topic, absenteeism and school attendance officers. So this is the most up-to-date trend, including our 24-25 data as it relates to chronic absenteeism. Remember that chronic absenteeism is defined by the Mississippi Department of Education as missing 10% or more of the school year which is equivalent in our case to 18 days. Again, you'll notice that for the 24-25 school year, I had a statewide chronic absenteeism rate is at 27.6%, representing approximately 125,823 students. And of course, you can see here that that does in fact reflect an increase from the 23-24 school year.
Senator McMahon has a question, Dr. Banner. You recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this reflective of K through 12 or is this?
K-12.
K through 12?
Yes, sir.
And so 27.6%. And how many families have been been addressed or through the courts?
I can't give you, I can work on getting you a number. I'm sure we have it. But I'm going to say that through the courts, it's probably not going to be as high a number as we might like to see.
What's driving the absenteeism, do you think?
We're gonna talk about that.
Um,
I got another slide.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. In fact, I'm gonna break this down by grade here in just a second so you can look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you break it down by like the performance of a student, like an A student versus a?
We can, yeah. Now, what we have done, and I'll share this in a minute, we haven't broken it down. We just received the most recent, but we haven't broken it down by student, but we do know, and this is not rocket science, we do know that lower performing schools typically have higher, and there's anomalies in that. That's not, but that's a correlation. Oh, got another?
In Norwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you have a list, a listing of those schools? And are they required to submit any type of, I guess, recovery plan, a plan that show how they intend to, make perfect on that?
Yeah, the answer to the first question is yes. We have a list of schools by district with their individual. We've also been able to break it down by month, like how that falls, what is their chronic absenteeism rate in February versus what it is in December. We've got that. The answer to your second question, we're going to talk about some initiatives that we want to implement going forward that will require districts to do what we call action plans. Currently, districts are simply required to do dropout prevention plans. They are required to do that. They're required to submit those to the Mississippi Department of Education, and we are required to approve those. However, in looking at this data and as we disaggregate it a little bit further, we just feel like that is not addressing this. And so we are actually proposing a much more articulated action plan for school districts who have over 10%, or schools rather, who have over 10% of their population that are chronically absent.
Okay, and final question, Mr. Chairman. Do you see, I guess, a dispersion or correlation between ADM and ADA? Has there been any variance?
Yeah, I mean, oh yeah, there has been. I believe that, ADA, even the way that it was gathered, it at least made, I guess, building level administrators consider attendance. Okay. And I'm not pro, con, either way. It's just a reality, And then with membership, I think you see maybe a little less there. They really aren't looking as much at attendance as much as they're looking at enrollment. Like, what are their enrollment numbers as opposed to attendance? And again, I do not in any way suggest that we have, leaders out there who don't care whether kids come to school. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying in the reality it's just a different kind of mindset.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So let's look at it, break it down by grade level.
One more question, Dr.
Oh, I
Van.
apologize.
Recognize Senator McMahon.
Of this 27.6%,
Yes, sir.
what's their average grade point averaged? Would you know that of the?
No, we would not. Well, we wouldn't. Well, we don't know that right now. Like I said, this is relatively new data. The only thing that we have done is articulated the chronic absenteeism rate based on the school's rating and performance.
Could I be a student and be chronically absent and still graduate?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not affecting the graduation rate.
I'm not saying it's not affecting graduation rate. I'm simply saying that it is possible that you could be chronically absent and still meet the requirements for graduation. There are some kids do, and I'll be honest with you, there are other kids that may not be able to do that. But it is a possibility. I mean, you could do it.
Is the number chronic absenteeism 27.6? Is that an agitated number or a corrupt number in terms of, does it take into account if a student is a public school student but participating in school from home? Is that considered absenteeism?
Well, absenteeism, I mean, we know that after COVID, there's been various opportunities for students to do, virtual learning. But I am going to say that chronic absenteeism by definition is attending instruction.
Right. And so that's my point. We have some public schools now that you can be a public school student and you do all of your work from home. So if this is an agitated number, if it's including that, we probably need to segment that.
Yeah.
Because so I have some medically fragile children in the area that I represent, and I've helped them get into public schools, but they take all their classes at home from their computer. So
Yeah.
and they're still eligible for sports. They're still eligible for,
Yeah.
They are public school students. So I just want to be sure we're not including them in this absentee.
Yeah. I got you.
Because
If
they're
they
not
are-
physically on campus.
If they're homebound students, which means then they are not counted in this.
Well, they're not all, and I may have misled, they're not all medically fragile. It seems like that's the families that are most interested. Some of them they just want their children to be at home all day with them, but they do attend class online. And if we're including that in that number, we need to segment those students out because they are attending. They're just not on campus. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, and I'm gonna be honest with you, there's probably not consistency in how that's being reported by school. The other thing is that there's a difference in virtual instruction and logging on and doing some work. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that varies. With the synchronous learning platform, we are trying to offer instruction through the platform in various ways, videos, direct instruction with a teacher, whatever. But I think there's a difference because the idea behind this is not that you stay at home and do assignments that you are given, but that you also receive the foundational instruction.
Right.
So I think that varies too from school to school.
I'm like you, I'm ambivalent to it. I'm not for or against it. I'm just trying to understand all the data.
I get
and
it.
See if we're segmenting that. I've only probably got 24 families that are taking advantage of this, but
Yeah.
they really like it because their students are at home with them. They do all the regular classes. They tell me they take their regular classes, they break for lunch, they still have recess at home, and then they come back to their classes and log in. So thank you. Thank you for
Sure.
allowing me to ask a few questions, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you a quick question, Dr. Vanderbilt. This number, this 27.6, that includes excused absences, correct? Do you know what the number would be if you remove the excused absences?
34% of these absences were excused.
Were excused?
Yes, sir.
So that number would have reduced
Mhm.
down to maybe 20% or so?
Mhm.
which is still higher than pre-COVID though.
Correct, correct. So we've got some areas that we've got to work on. And when I get through some of these data slides, I'm going to talk to you about a few things that we have analyzed through the data that we think could be attributing to our increase.
You recognize Senator Norwood for a
Mhm.
second first, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I was going back to previous discussion regarding, homeschooling.
Mhm.
Do we have consistent, or consistency in accountability for homeschooling across the state?
No.
So,
From our perspective, once a student, a parent has to register every September the 15th currently, or basically they're assuring that their child is being homeschooled. And then when they pull a child out of a public school, they do what we call a card. And that card is on file that they are providing homeschool services for their student. But then outside of that, that's all we know.
and I guess it leads to something else,
Mhm.
and I probably will be too long, but I know when you look at the correlation between youth violence and so forth, a lot of times that the public schools get hit for the child not being in school. When the child has not been in school, the child is homeschooled. So once you, I guess, somewhere along the lines, we need to have a conversation about how we can tighten that gap up to make sure that the reporting streams are tightened so that when it come out that if it's not a public school child, then it shouldn't be labeled as a public school child. The responsibility to go where it is, but that's a subject for another day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let me ask you, the definition of absent chronic absenteeism, is that a state definition or is that a department or?
It's a federal definition, yes.
Okay. Can it be modified or do you have to follow that?
I mean, I don't know. Well, I guess it could be modified. I think more than that, I think it's about setting up consistent systems for documenting absences and the reason why they're absent. And we have looked at, Dr. Marshall and I have looked at definitions for every other state. We've looked at their protocols, and so we do have some thoughts on the fact that Mississippi needs to reconsider that in some way, investigate and explore it.
Senator Boyd, I recognize you for your question.
That was a major portion of our question, because some districts, like for instance, if they take a trip to the Capitol, that is considered in some districts that they're absent that day. In
Mhm.
other districts, it's considered that they are not absent that day. So there's such variation. And for us to kind of hit this, there seems to need to be some consistency. And I'm really interested in the absences that are not excused by the district, because that's the number where we really need to be targeting, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yes, sir.
And just coming from rural district, a student has to go to Mobile or Hattiesburg, we're talking about an hour one way, so it's an excused absence pretty much the entire school day. So it's just like, why do we include maybe the excused absences? Maybe it's a separate category because we're such a rural area, and then other districts like that throughout the state as well.
Yeah, and I'm proud we brought this point up because the lack of consistency in reporting, we're self-imposing some of these issues on ourselves, creating roadblocks, I'm sorry, I guess if you will, for ourselves, because there is no mandated reporting process, if you will, as far as coding from a state level. And you'll see in the plan that we've been working on, that's one of the proposals. Also, there's the issue with the consistency of the number of excused absences in districts. So some districts like, they basically give you 2, 3 excuse, absences based on like a parent call-in or something like that, while others is many, many, many more. I don't want to necessarily give you a number, but it could be 10, 15 absences. It depends, depending on the district. But also you are, Senator Boyd, you are 100% correct that a student could be paging here where we know exactly where they are and we understand the educational value in that. Or they could be playing for a baseball state championship or football state championship. And if they're coded a certain way, they are considered. And by the federal definition, they are considered. Because if you are not physically sitting in the seat, by that definition, you're considered chronically absent. So we're self-imposing some of these issues on ourselves. But they've worked very hard on putting a plan together and also identified. I think it'll be interesting when you see some of the trends and why you see these chronic absenteeism rates.
Okay, so the next slide, what we did was we broke down the 24-25 data by grade level. And you can see that obviously in the elementary grades, particularly that of second, third, fourth, and fifth, that is our lowest chronic absenteeism rates. And as you move to the secondary level defined as middle and high school, you see that those rates obviously increase for various reasons. So this is I've got another graphic here in just a second, but this is a graphic that kind of gives you a visual representation of how we got to that 27, what that represents by grade in our 27.6 chronic absenteeism rate. All right, I'm going to show it to you like this. This is rate by grade band, and our grade band is elementary, middle, and high. Elementary is typically defined, it varies from district to district, but we typically define it as K-5. Middle school is grades 6 through 8, and high school, of course, is grades 9 through 12. And you can see a trend here starting in 2018-19, of course, prior to COVID. And you can see what has happened at the 3 different grade bands over the last several years. It doesn't go unnoticed that at the high school, there was a spike even from 23-24 to 24-25. I was actually a little taken aback by the middle school going down a bit, even though it's still higher than elementary. And then elementary, it looks like it was a little down, but relatively stagnant in this trend data. So we did I'm sorry.
You recognize.
Mr. Chairman, after yesterday's hearing, I was talking to my 8th grade geometry teacher. And I was shocked to find that there were students who did not take a full load their senior year. And she said that her grandchildren were going to school in Amory, and that one of the things that took place is the students were allowed to leave during the day. If they didn't have a class, they could leave, go home, and come back. And I mentioned to her that someone said his child only took 1 course his senior year, and she said, well, my grandchildren took 4 courses their senior year because their grandmother made them. And just listening to the conversation, it seems to me that what we're doing in any number of ways is signaling to students it's not really important to come to school. It's not important to be here. You can go drive during the day. I can't imagine leaving school during the school day and going home and riding around. I can't imagine not taking a full load your senior year. I can't imagine not doing anything at the end of the school after you've taken your test. I mean, we're shifting from the concept of there's an infinite number of things to learn, and you've not learned everything there is to learn. And if you're in school, there's a class you go to and learn something you didn't know before, to something that is so focused, and I think we're aware of this, is so focused on the requirements and the testing that it's gotten to the point that's all that matters. And that ain't right, Mr. Chairman. Can you do something about it?
Well, I was just going to say it kind of parallels what Senator Polk and Senator Wiggins were talking about yesterday. And then Dr. Evans mentioned that they're actually looking at revamping the whole 9th through 12th grade, the way that's being taught. But I do agree with you, my senior year, I was there taking classes all day long. I didn't think about leaving, to be honest with you. So I think we need to get back to that, otherwise why even have the 12th grade? Maybe go to pre-K, where Senator Wiggins was
Well-
even discussing. So I'm waiting to see what the department has, because I think it's much needed. And it's, I agree with you there. So
But, Mr. Chairman, when I was in high school, I had chemistry in the 10th
We
grade.
just can't pay for it with the tax credit.
I had chemistry when I was in the 10th grade. And when I got to Mississippi State, I had freshman chemistry. It was the same class. And it was not because freshman chemistry at Mississippi State was not a rigorous course either. My senior year, we had what was called senior science. After you'd had biology, chemistry, and physics, you had a senior science class that was practically all lab. And I can hold forth about that at length, although I won't. But that's what was being taught in basically a rural school in Mississippi in the 1960s.
okay. Thank you, Senator Brown.
These kids.
Dr. Vanderford.
All right. So we did, like I mentioned before, we did an analysis of what we thought or ideas, Dr. Marshall and I did. Dr. Marshall is a former high school principal at a large 7A school. And of course, I mentioned to y'all yesterday that I had done administration K-12. And so we just looked at the data, got in a room and just started looking at the data. And we be driving down the street and think of something and call each other. So we wanted to articulate some of these thoughts. One of the things that has kind of been alluded to in y'all's conversation is student exemptions from semesters exams lead to low school attendance. So, for example, if you look at month-to-month data from 24-25, the chronic absenteeism was highest during the month of May. And that would equate to somewhere around 40%.
Okay. I hear you on this, but I've got some other questions for you. If we know, particularly at the high school level, May is the time that you've got all the dates that kids are going to state championships, that they're going to for all those spring sports. So if we don't have data that differentiates where this is happening, we actually might have an inverse effect. Because if some of these school districts, if some of these school districts actually, to be exempt, you have to have not been absent, we might be doing the inverse
Right.
by making a change in that policy.
Yeah.
So that's why we've got to have better data on this, because I can tell you, I remember, and I do have a problem. I think you should be exempt one time a year, not for both. But I made sure, even if I was sick, I was at school because I didn't want to take that Algebra 2 exam or
Right.
whatever it was. So it kept me in school, even
That's
feeling bad, because I wanted to make sure I was exempt from that exam at the end of the year.
Yes,
So,
I agree. We also looked at, there is a correlation in increased absenteeism on school days preceding district intersession and holidays. So we went back in MSIS, I don't know, probably a couple of weeks ago, and looked at every Thursday, Friday, the month of September leading up to October, when many of our school districts have their fall break, or for modified schedules, what we call intersession. And so on Friday, on the first Friday, there may be 5,000 absences, and I'm just making a number up. On the next Friday, there was, I don't know, 55. That, the next, it increased maybe a little bit, but the Friday before the week that, and not every district has the same fall break or intercession date, but it popped up to like, I don't know, 31,000. I mean, there was a stark difference in what we were seeing every Friday. And then looking at the Thursday, Friday, particularly the Friday before a break in school. And I think what we're seeing now is that in olden times, we didn't have as many breaks, but now you're having more frequent breaks. And as a result, that too is impacting. Okay. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with intercessions or anything like that. It's just something we've got to address. We've got to look at. Direct correlation, obviously, between low school performance and high chronic absenteeism. We talked about, I think we mentioned that earlier. Smaller schools and high poverty communities, they have higher chronic absenteeism rates that typically exceed the state average or well exceed the state average. 34, I mentioned this earlier, 34% of all absences in 2024-25 were excused. And among chronically absent students, which is the 18 or more days. So I think that this is going to be addressed when we really dig in and start providing either through systems or policies how you are to articulate a student who is away from school for any reason. And then the last is 21% of absences among chronically absent students were excused absences or disciplinary suspensions. So I will say to you that further breaking that down, 3% is actually the disciplinary suspensions. And then the other 18% was the excused absences. And again, this is of the chronically absent. These are like, we bundle those kids that are considered chronically absent, which is the greater than 10%. And then among that population, this is what we've seen. And so we've got to look at documentation of school attendance in lots of different areas. We talked about, being a page here and how wonderful that experience is, and that we may have schools marking those students in different ways. But also, we also have to look at our disciplinary suspensions, those that are out of school, those that are in school. What are the kids doing in in-school suspension? How are you reflecting that? So we just have to really dig in, we being Dr. Marshall and I, dig in and evaluate all of this and then come up with some consistency and some direction on how we document that. Now, do I think that's going to take us down to 11% chronic absenteeism? Not necessarily, but I do think it is a factor that we are going to have to address. All right. So in addition to that, there's a couple of proposals that we have for addressing the chronic absenteeism problem. The first one is a new focus on graduation success rather than just dropout prevention. And we want to do that by engaging families of students in grades K through 3 through attendance messaging, mentoring, and recognition programs to reinforce positive attendance habits, not only for the student, but for the family. Because we need to do more to impact the thought about absenteeism while we got them coming to school, so that it could have a greater impact on them when they get to that age where they're not coming to schools often. Build partnerships with healthcare providers and provide flexibility for families facing extenuating circumstances, and establish outreach systems to re-engage students quickly. Be very intentional about what we're doing, and then implement grade-specific supports, advisory periods, peer mentoring, career or technical pathway connections to strengthen the engagement among our older children. Finding reasons for why they should be engaged in what we're providing them, particularly at the high school. Attendance officers, change the focus there. They would no longer be attendance officers. We would make them more student success and graduation coaches. They would promote collaboration between the districts, determining what one district is doing that was working and helping other districts see if that would work for them and implement that. Encourage personal outreach from teachers and staff. We know that if students have a connection to someone at the school, they're more likely to come to the school. And then, of course, we have to address a base salary increase. And our thoughts were we would establish a minimum base average salary of $40,000 as average. Current average is $30,951. And this would be a permanent adjustment that would make the minimum salary start at $30,000. Let's talk about this 10 chronic absenteeism, 10% plus missed days. We talked earlier about action plans. Once they, and I'm gonna be honest with you, with this criteria, this would include every district in the state would have to address and create an action plan. If their student 10% of their overall student population populated being chronically absent, they would be required, it triggers that they would have to do a plan. The plan would require disaggregation of absenteeism to determine specific groups and subgroups, timeframes where their absences are increasing, and other factors. Really digging into that data and saying, okay, where is this happening? Why is this happening? What can we do to alleviate some of those things? And I'm gonna be honest with you, people talk about low-hanging fruit. I mean, we've got to address some of our reporting pieces, which I find to be the low-hanging fruit, and then dig into some really innovative ideas for getting students in school. We have talked about a system of intermediate or intermediary family support interventions prior to punitive youth court measures. And what we're finding is that when students accrue the number of unexcused absences or absences, and we do in fact employ the youth court, a lot of times they have cases on their dockets that seemingly are more important than a student not coming to school. And so we just don't know that there's equity in that practice throughout the state. But what we've talked about is setting up a system where if a child meets a certain threshold, then we would have intermediary family support that those families would have to go through prior to ever getting to the youth court. So that way our youth court judges, they know that when the child and the family comes before them, they have already had these intermediate supports and services. We've talked about managing the SAO incentive program to promote innovative local attendance strategies. Just an idea of incentivizing our SAOs with improving the chronic absenteeism rates in their schools, their assigned schools. And then the last thing is we want to be transparent. We want to create a district dashboard. Georgia, I believe, has one of these, and it is basically a map of the state of Mississippi. It is updated on a daily basis, and at any point in time, the public, any member of the public, be it a stakeholder or a community member, they can go in by district, by school, and they can pull up for that day what the attendance rate is. And they could check, if you want to check it every day, you could look at the trends. That data would be disaggregated by subgroup, disaggregated, excused, unexcused, but just having a dashboard that provides, that's public facing, that provides on-demand data, not waiting till the end of the year and going, oh, we had 27.6%, chronic absenteeism. You look at it on a daily basis. So what I would say is chronic absenteeism between 25-30%, it hurts graduation rates, jobs and safety. And so we're hoping that the plan that we're coming up with builds early action, accountability, compliance monitoring, and family partnerships as it relates to students being in the classroom, being in school, to receive the quality instruction that we provide.
Thank you, Dr. Bennett. I'm looking at Senator Wiggins for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to the, this falls under the youth court measures. Judiciary A had a hearing and where the youth court judges presented to us, and they looked at us and said the number one thing is handling absenteeism, and they asked for, but what we were told was they're not always being brought to the court. And then I've been given data that shows punitive youth court measures. You say they're actually being handled in justice court, city court, youth court, which I haven't figured out why that's the case. But what is your feeling on, I understand about interventions, but also the quote punitive side to get things handled in the youth court? Because what they told us is it's holding the parents accountable and responsible. And and that's not happening apparently right now. And so, but there is a process. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and not to negate anything that anyone has said, but I don't know, 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, did a state superintendent roadshow. We did 6 different locations in the state. We were on the Gulf Coast, Hattiesburg, Jackson, Meridian, the Delta, Cleveland, and then Oxford. And I'll be honest with you, there were certain areas of the state where superintendents just looked at me and said, they're not seeing us. They're telling us blatantly they're not going to see. They won't see us. I mean, they're not.
Who won't?
The judge, the youth court. Certain areas of the state, so they won't even see us.
The youth court judges won't take those cases? Is that okay? Well, I'm asking the question.
Now, that wasn't in all 6 regions. I mean, it's all kind of regional, but it's so.
And did they say why they would say that?
Well, the reason that was given there is that their perception or their understanding was that those particular youth court judges were prioritizing their cases and felt like that weapons charges or whatever should be prioritized over
Mhm.
non-attendance, you know?
Okay, and so are were those superintendents, I guess, frustrated or not happy that it was not being handled in the youth courts?
Yes, sir.
What I thought. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you very much.
Senator Boyd, you recognize.
I spoke before the youth court judges that they're summer CLE, and one of the things that they brought up that is consistently happening in their courtrooms is that they'll bring a person before their courtroom for chronic absenteeism. And then the family will present a card saying that now, no, they're just going to be homeschooled. And so I asked them specifically, how many of y'all are seeing this? And almost every hand in that room was raised. Is that something y'all are hearing as well from the superintendents? Because maybe we need to adopt some type of policy that if you get called in for chronic absenteeism, you can't immediately convert to a homeschool if there's not like extenuated circumstances or something.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Senator Boyd, and I confirmed with Dr. Evans. I have not heard a great deal of that from our regional supervisors for SAOs. I don't negate the fact that it could very well happen. But I haven't really heard, that. Now, I will tell you, MDE has work to do. We know that. We're not in any way, we need to do a better job of being consistent with what we're doing and getting those students either the intervention or to that youth court judge in a timely manner. But I think what we're doing is trying to partner with all entities and address, okay, what are the issues? How can we modify what we're doing to better accommodate? Because I feel like just coming into this position, I've only been in this position for, 5 months. I just feel like there's a lot of kind of disconnection among the entities that make this system work. And so I know Dr. Marshall and I have probably been in more meetings, cross office meetings about this issue than any other issue in the 5 months that I've been here. So, there's 3 sides to every story. There's your side, my side, and the truth that lies somewhere in the middle. So, but I do want to stand up here and say, we are taking responsibility for what we need to be doing in this area for children and their families. Thank you.
Thank y'all very much. Great questions there. I always hate to miss the opportunity to build on things that are said very quickly. One of the things that was mentioned early on with the use of some of our retirees as teachers. That's why I just want to reiterate, it is so important that we're able to revisit the legislation that's involved in allowing our retirees to come back. We've talked about this several times with different groups. Really opening the spirit of that is great, but the guardrails really need to be opened up to allow any teacher who's retired to come back, not just in certain specific areas or certain part. It needs to be. We have to utilize that population. But next on the agenda, thank you, Ms. Clemens, again for your the time, your time and the information you provided. But next, we want to bring John Farrell to the podium. John is the Chief of School and District Transformations and School and District Transformation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Good morning. Appreciate this opportunity to come in here and present to y'all on a few things that we're doing in our office, the Office of School and District Transformation. How do you, the green one? All right, perfect. All right, so we're going to talk about a couple of key things in our office. Just kind of give you a little bit of background information. Our office has 4 major areas. Those are the district's transformation, that is school improvement identifications, CTE, and workforce development. If you see right here, this is the chart of the actual districts that are currently in classified as districts of transformation. That is the trend over the last 5 years of accountability rating for those districts in there. As you can see, this past year, there was a slide for each of those districts. So we are working closely with those interim superintendents in finding those root causes for those and creating strategic plans to address those needs from their needs assessment and those areas of weaknesses that we want to help them grow. And that kind of leads into one of the first things I want to talk to you about, that what we're working with those superintendents. We have developed a interim superintendent or MDE administrative evaluation tool. And the need for that is because the traditional tool that is used in Mississippi to evaluate superintendents is the Mississippi School Board Association tool that they have there. Well, most of the standards in that evaluation tool address the relationship between the superintendent and the school board. Okay, well, in district transformation, the superintendents there that serve as interim superintendents, they do not have a local school board. So they report to the State Board of Education. So we wanted to make sure that we had a tool to evaluate them and work with them and help them, support them in growing those districts, which they reside in a way that actually addresses the way that is structured with them being those interim superintendents. So in that, we're going through that process right now. There are 8 standards in that evaluation system, but the beginning of that is that we worked with each of the interim superintendents the last several months going into this school year and did a complete comprehensive needs assessment of their district to find those areas of weakness. And they have identified 3 strategic priorities, those areas that they feel going through that analysis of their district that need the most attention up in this upcoming school year. And they are working diligently with their leadership teams and with support from MDE to try to raise those areas of need there and through those strategic plans. The second column there kind of addresses low performing districts. We've also created, it says 18-month plan, but the actual work is done in 18 months. There's about 6 months leading up into that work. Right there, that is any districts who are failing for the first time, or they may be going into that category where they could possibly become a district of transformation. We send in a leadership team from MDE going into those districts to create a plan to provide technical assistance in all areas, whether that be leadership, literacy, math, all those areas to help them. And we do a comprehensive plan working with the district, with representatives from MDE to create that plan and then carry out that plan over an 18-month period. Because really, if you go into a school district in January and you start working with them on that intensive level of support for that district, you're not going to see a whole lot of movement when you test in April and May. So the thought there is to have that cycle, then go through the next year. And on that second cycle of accountability and testing, we should start to see some of those positive moving in those positive directions through that plan and seeing if the opportunity plan is working from the technical assistance that we are providing for those districts. The third column there kind of talks about low performing schools. So in our office, we provide leadership coaching to schools that have a school improvement identification. So that is a federal requirement there that we provide those leadership coaches to schools who have identifications in there. But one thing that I noticed coming in new last year, that we have several schools across the states that are low performing but they don't qualify for school improvement. So what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to grow our leadership coaching force to be able to put leadership coaches in those schools as well that do not have identification from school improvement guidelines. That's very important to us to get those leadership coaching coaches in there. We feel like one of the most important pieces in moving schools is that building level administrator, giving them instructional strategies and those types of things to help impact instruction in the classroom. Several years ago, when accountability came around, it made the job of and the role of the building level administrator become that instructional leader of the building as well. So we want to make sure that we are supporting building level administrators in our struggling schools to help them become those instructional leaders in their building, to help move those buildings forward, to help instruction in the classroom. So that's one of the goals there that we are wanting to do there is to strengthen that force with our leadership coaches. And so in all three of these areas here, I'm going to kind of allude to what Wendy Clemens was talking about on her side. MDE is offering supports throughout the state in low performing schools and where it's needed in literacy, math, interventions, special education, and leadership coaching from our office. So those coaches are going out into the field throughout the year to help those struggling schools. Another thing that we've done with our leadership coaching model coming into the department last year, realized our leadership coaches were getting into their buildings 2 days a month, okay, to go in there and try to impact our building level leaders. We've restructured our schedule for our leadership coaches. So we've also hired 4 more. They're all part-time contractual workers, so each of them have 2 schools apiece. But we've reconfigured our calendar and our schedule for our leadership coaches to where they're getting in the buildings 4 times a month now. And then they're required to go in 2 days every other week to be able to get in the buildings more to help with that. So that has, I think that is going to work well. That we needed our leadership coaches in our building more, but we do need more leadership coaches, and that's one of the things
Let me ask you,
that we would like support from. Yes, sir.
quick question. So when you send these folks in to help leadership coaches and so forth, do you face a lot of resistance from districts, or is that welcomed, or how are you?
No, they're
What's
very
the
welcome.
reaction?
I have not come across an incident since I've been at the department to where we have had any resistance. Actually, in the reconfiguring, we had to kind of move around some leadership coaches from one school that they had been in to another. And we created an entire transition process for that. The previous leadership coach went in with the new leadership coach to meet with the principals, transition all data, all reports and everything like that were transitioned in that. And of course, some of them they were upset that they were having to change coaches because they appreciated the efforts that the coach they had did that. But in order for us to reconfigure and get the coaches in the buildings more, and for travel, for traveling too, and those types of things, we had to do a little bit of reshuffling and things like that. And actually 5 of the schools that we have been supporting are now going on to a virtual model of coaching. We looked at the schools that have been with us and that have gone up and been successful. There were a couple of B schools and very high C schools that have shown that that trajectory of going in a positive direction. And from communicating with our leadership coaches on who said they're ready to they can go to the virtual model. That's how we kind of made that transition to make room for more in-person visits for the schools that are still or any schools that are still low performing. On that virtual option, though, it's not just completely virtual. So they're also, those coaches are going into those buildings at least 1 time a quarter. And if the need arises to need to go in there more, there is time worked in those contracts for them to be able to go more if needed.
So when the state's intervention, either low performing or failing schools, are the districts improving? Are they staying the same? I mean, are what you're doing to help these districts, is it improving their scores, improving their school district? Is there data to support that?
Yes, this is a model that we changed the schedule up a little bit, but this is a model that's been around for several years, and the number of districts in transformation the last several years has gone down. I think that, I don't have the exact years and numbers, but I think there were 9 at one point several years ago, and now there are 4 districts of transformation. And actually, this past year, the Mississippi Achievement School District model separated. There were 2 school districts under that, and they have separated. So last year, technically, you could say that there were 3 districts that were in transformation. Now there's 4, but the 2 districts actually separated, and they are 2 completely different school districts. Now, we hired a new superintendent to go to one of those 2, so now there are 4. One of the things too, under the low performing school piece, that I kind of want to mention, that what we're looking at is in law, and in the past, we have done district takeover. In the law, it does allow for a school takeover. So what we're looking at for the future is to not take over complete whole districts, but look at taking over individual schools. And so what does that mean? Well, you may have a district that has 10 schools, and let's say you got a couple of Bs, there's 2 or 3 Cs, but then you have 2 or 3 Fs in that district as well. So what we're looking at doing, and we've looked at other states and how they kind of approach this. And one of the ones that really caught our attention was the Florida model and what they do in taking over schools instead of districts. So what that allows you to do is to be able to go and help that individual school in those districts rise up and put key initiatives in place there to help those schools individually, instead of having to take over a whole entire district and those types of things. So we're looking at that as a model to move forward with, so that we can help individual schools across the state and not just have to worry about the entire district. And our thought there is too, is if we're helping the lowest performing schools rise up, well, then the district's going to rise up as well with that. And we're not just confined to those districts that are failing districts, but helping across with F schools as well. So like I was talking about the leadership coaches, what we're wanting to do, we're hoping right now we currently have 10 leadership coaches, and we are in 33 schools with that. And like I said, we had the 5 that are on virtual. So we're only able to get into 33 buildings. That's elementary, middle, and high. We're only able to get in to help support our leaders, our building level leaders in 33 schools. And there is a need for this. Once again, I said one of the most important things that we feel like in our office is that building level leader to move the school, to work with teachers on their instruction and their instructional practices. So like I said, we currently have 10. We'd like to go to 25 is a number that we would like to start moving towards.
Don't we have a superintendent's academy or something where this maybe should be taught on the front end, these versus waiting until the school's failing or low performing?
Yes, and now
Going-
Dr. Evans did start the superintendent's academy this year with that. And I don't know the numbers of superintendents going through that, but that is currently going on in 2 different cohorts. But that is a superintendent's academy. What we're talking about here and what these leadership coaches work with are the actual the principals at the building level, working with their teams within the buildings to help move those schools. I'm gonna move over into workforce development. Go ahead.
Senator Bryan, you got a question? We recognize it.
We may be getting to this later in the hearing, but as I understand it, you're talking about working with principals and superintendents and people in the school district, but not the school board itself.
That is correct.
Is there something coming up later in the presentation about school boards?
We will somewhat speak to it when Dr. Vanderford is here. I will tell you, we do acknowledge the issues that you may be speaking about. We are limited in the scope in which what we can actually, how much we can interject with our boards. That primarily has been the role of Mississippi School Board Association. But we are actively seeking ways to correct some of the issues that we have, because it is definitely a issue, Senator.
Maybe I should wait until we get to the next. Should I just wait till we get to that on the?
Yeah, it would be more, it would fit more with the next presentation. Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I see that you've got 4 districts of transformation here. Based on the new data that just came out on grades, how many Fs do we have?
In schools or districts?
Districts.
Districts, there are a total of 3 F districts and there's 6 D districts.
And is there any movement that you will put those F or D districts in these districts of will you add those to the districts of transformation? Or are you going to stay with these 4?
That is a process we would have to go through and look at.
Okay. And of those D and F districts, do you know right now how many have been teetering on that D and F for some time?
Of the Ds, I know that there's a couple that have been teetering on them. Yes, ma'am. It's been consistent with the districts that are in those categories.
Okay, so we have really a category of perpetually low performing or failing districts that, how many total of those do we have in the state?
That are consistent with DNFs.
Yes.
I don't know the number in front of me, but I would say that 6 to 7 is probably that number.
Okay. And we did give you a little bit more permission to go ahead and intervene in some of those districts with that. So are y'all looking at a plan to possibly put those perpetually low performing or failing districts in these districts of transformation? Or is that something not on the table right now?
Well, that's on the table. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
To answer that question more directly, any school district that meets those qualifications is 100% eligible for that. And we are looking at putting them into that district of transformation. Yes, ma'am.
So to follow up with that, what's the timeline? How long does it take once you start looking at a district until you actually put them in the district of transformation?
Going through that process, we're going through that process currently right now.
Was it 1
when-
month or 12 months or 18? How long does it take?
You want to come to that?
I need you to go to the microphones, please. Thank you.
It would be dependent upon the section of the statute that we utilize to approach the putting them in the district of transformation, but the recent technical amendments to the law make it much simpler in some instances, like low performing districts, that we can move immediately into the process without having to go through the Commission on School Accreditation and the governor's proclamation of the state of emergency. It gives the authority to State Board of Education, so rather quickly.
Well, the reason I ask is it seems like I follow what Senator Boyd says. We've got these perpetually low performing or failing school districts. The testimony from yesterday indicated that with the new accreditation model, we're going to have even lower scores. And so by waiting a year or whatever, we're not helping these kids in the districts and not get better. So we need to immediately intervene.
Definitely agree with
Take
that.
them
And I mean,
over, whatever needs to be done to stop the loss.
and a year is prior to the technical amendment, a year is about the timeline that it would take if you took the accreditation auditors in to actually audit all of the process standards in the district, then come back, prepare the report for the local school district, have them do process to respond to that, and then move to the commission and the state board and then on to the governor. That was about a 12-month.
Is there anything we need to do beyond the amendment that was passed this previous session to assist in the department and then providing assistance to these districts that are failing or performing low? Or
So that would be a conversation that we, probably would have after we do the first one under the new process. But looking at the new process, and Mr. Farrell and I have been working with accreditation to prepare the new policy for accreditation to go to the board, but it just on the surface looks like it's going to be much simpler, and we would be able to expedite that process. And so until we go through it one time, I would be hesitant to say we're good where we are, but it's so much better.
okay, all right. All right, thank you. Senator Norwood, you have a question? For
You
Dr.
asked,
Farrell?
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So going on to workforce development, I'm just going to mention a few things, what we're working on and where we're going in here in this department. So we've created a K-12 workforce development plan and to go into school districts and work across state, but we're still in the middle of creating that because of what our next steps are. We're going to create individualized plans for each of the 8 ecosystem, partnering with Accelerate Mississippi. We're currently have identified a point of contact and the people to work with on this in each and every district in the state. We are gathering initiatives, work-based learning opportunities, things that are going in the state through the various districts right now, going into meetings that we will have in November with all areas throughout the state alongside with Accelerate, bringing in business partners and then creating those individualized plans to meet the needs of each of the individual areas. Because there are different opportunities for employment, for careers in various parts across the state. So one thing that we know moving forward that we're going to need some sort of digital platform for housing, all this information, all these initiatives for the schools to be able to access to go through the plan in their schools, go through the curriculum in their schools at each grade level. Also for data reporting needs and those types of things to ensure that we're getting data on how effective we are being in our workforce awareness and workforce development platform. Also to see, be able to track those students as they go through and what careers they are going into and those types of needs there with that. This is just kind of a graphic here of which outlines our model. The approach that we've taken at the elementary level or K-5 level and what we have done already, and these are ready to kind of to go out and are being introduced to elementary teachers as of yesterday. At the K-5 level, the HQIM materials that have been discussed yesterday, what we found is those HQIM materials, the different ones that have been adopted with the state for districts to choose to use, they have workplace skills embedded in throughout the curriculum. And so each of these different grade bands we have in the K-5 space, we have identified those essential workplace skills such as communication, teamwork, things like that for the different grade bands. And we've done a crosswalk with the HQIM materials to where each of those skills are embedded within. And we're going to have those are going to be stressed through in the classrooms as those essential skills that students need to be able to function in the workplace. So we kind of taken that approach with the K-5. So it is a K-5, a K-12 approach, and then the middle schools prep and exploration to where opportunities in the secondary piece for internships and real world experiences in those to find a career. The 6-12 piece is what we're working on next and to finalize those plans in each of those individual places, working alongside with Accelerate in a partnership with them to bring the business partners to the table to build those relationships in each of the different areas across the state to get those going as soon as we can and have that plan carried out throughout the state, working with Accelerate. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you very much. Oh, thank you, Mr. Farrell. So next we have Dr. Paula Vanderford. She's the Chief Accountability Officer for the Mississippi Department of Education.
Good morning. I, like Ms. Clemens, need about 90 minutes, but I'll go through these rapidly and hopefully we will have an opportunity to come back and discuss many of the initiatives that I wanted to address today in further detail before the session. As you know, if you've seen our FY budget request, Office of Accountability ask for funding for more initiatives than just the 3 that I have on the screen today. But I would like to begin the conversation about the increased teacher pay, focusing on district leadership, and then our accreditation audit review teams. So as we talked a little bit yesterday, you do have a handout that is from USA Facts from May of 2024. That's the most current data that we have comparing states and salaries for teachers. And of course, this has been adjusted for the cost of living. We know our data in Mississippi, but when we rely on other federal bureaus to reporting, for reporting, we can't say that the information for all of the other states is accurate. We've talked a lot over the last 2 days about the increase in performance that we've had over the last decade, and not to undermine the work that any of you do or that we do at the agency as policymakers. Our job is a little simpler. What's happening is happening in the classrooms, and the teachers are working very hard, and the leadership is working very hard to improve outcomes for all students. And so for that, we would like to support our teachers and leaders by advocating for them to have an increase in pay, and so that we're no longer 46th out of 49 states reporting having the lowest pay. And then as we talked when Senator Bryant had the question yesterday, we have a lot of recruitment efforts to recruit teachers from our border states. But as part of this, you can see it's really hard to attract those around us due to the discrepancies in the pay. We talked yesterday, I mentioned 2 surveys that we do on an annual basis out of the Office of Teaching and Leading, and I have Dr. Murphy and Dr. Van Cleve here today to ensure that I don't miss anything. But we gain a lot of information from our workforce survey as well as our recruitment and retention survey. And so we have a couple of slides with some quotes from teachers that are taking from those surveys. And so we hear constantly year after year about salary and compensation being what is consistently pulling at teachers to move away from the profession. So you can see in this quote, teaching in other states, because this individual could go from making $20,000 more dollars wherever he or she was planning to move. So in just 2 years, from 22 to 24, teacher pay jumped as the most important factor on this survey for teacher recruitment, from 54% to 73% in those 2 years. And then here, this teacher is just provided a quote about living from paycheck to paycheck. So again, we see salary and benefits over and over again with these surveys being the number one. And so we are just pleading with you for consideration to honor the work that these teachers and leaders have done and allow them to be competitive, or allow us in Mississippi to be competitive on a national scale. So shifting gears a little bit to the district leadership piece. So we have an initiative, a new initiative, Mississippi Leads, and that is leading education achievement in districts and schools. And we're working to build out this to be an effective leadership model. So this is definitely a work in progress. We're beginning with the Mississippi Superintendent's Institute. We'll be talking to you more about that. We have that institute underway with training. We have 2 cohorts, one of new superintendents and one with career superintendents. So it's a module that they go throughout the course of the year. We have completed 2 of the sessions, and our response rate has been really great for the content of the modules. We've been working on revamping our orientation for school leaders, primarily the leadership training for principals. We've had a great response to the 3 modules that we have out now, strengthening schools, strengthening teams, and strengthening instruction. So those documents or those training modules, we're continuing to revise those based on feedback of what the principals are saying that they they need more. And of course, all of our training that we have is aligned to our professional growth system and our standards for administrators. Now, we definitely would like to build out this with including some teacher leadership initiatives and training. And then I want to talk, I know we won't be able to do that today, but across a couple of these about board governance. We've been in conversation and working with the School Boards Association. And I know this came up during the last legislative session about looking at how do we improve our training efforts for board members. So the idea here is whether you serve as a board member or a superintendent or a principal or a teacher leader, that everyone is hearing the same message around standards for good instructional leadership. And finally here, I could speak all day around the accreditation audit review teams and tie that back into all of the conversations that we've had. But just a little background, it was initially funded by the legislature, these accreditation audit review teams. We were brought over from the Office of Accreditation to speak with Chairman Tollison at the time about how did we address some of the deficiencies that we were seeing in districts. And due to the lack of pens at capacity and staff with the agency, we were able to receive funding for contractual auditors. And the legislature or the Senate at that time asked that we begin our random unannounced audits in C, D, and F districts. So we have 32 process standards that are all based on federal law, state law, or state board of education policy. But what we did was select a limited number of those standards, those that we believe to have the greatest impact on governance, the district adhering to local school board policies, those that were related to school operations, like reporting days, absolutely tie back to chronic absenteeism and reporting on student records, appropriate grades, et cetera, for school safety, as well as instructional practices. So we ended up selecting about half of those. Now, we did eliminate at the time federal standards for like IDEA, child nutrition, CTE, what am I missing? Oh, and all the title programs out of the Office of Federal Programs, because those standards are already on like a 3-year monitoring cycle. So we felt like if districts were already going to be monitored within 3 years, based on that, then there was no need to duplicate that work within accreditation. So when we had a large school district, I'll just use Rankin County because that's where I live, what we would do was be selective. We would ensure that we had an appropriate number of elementary schools in our sample, an appropriate number of middle schools, as well as high schools. So we did not audit in this process every school within the district unless it was a small district. And then within that sample, we monitored or evaluated all senior records, no matter the class size. But with other grade levels, we just selected samples of student records. But we refer to this, I mean, not officially, but like as early warning signs. So when we looked at local school board policies and they had a policy that did not align with the requirements in state law or state board policy, then we were able to identify those. And then when we compiled the reports and released those to the districts, they, of course, had to do a corrective action. So in many cases, some of the instances of noncompliance that we've talked about today could be caught if we could reinstitute this process. So the process ended, with funding, and then of course, COVID, it had an impact on everything. So we do still have a minimal amount of funding through the agency to have some contractual auditors. But what when we go back to talk about the board governance, we have about 8 districts right now that accreditation is monitoring every local school board meeting that they have, whether the meeting lasts 1 hour or it lasts 5 hours. And in some of these instances, these local districts are calling special call meetings and having 2 and 3 special call meetings a week. So we would have to, excuse me, those that are monitoring those 8 districts in those board meetings have to stop what they're doing and go and participate in that Zoom meeting, or in some instances, we're able to attend these meetings in person. So there's definitely a need there. So the auditors that we do have on contract, many of them are retired superintendents, and they're helping us monitor these districts for these governance issues. So lots of issues. Too many. I mean, if we could show you some of the videos of what we see in these local board meetings, they're throwing things, they're yelling at one another, to the point that when we're trying to listen on the call, we can't even understand what they're saying in many instances. Name calling. I mean, and day-to-day operations. I mean, we'll see an agenda or listen to a 3-hour board meeting, and not at any point in that 3 hours do they talk about anything on the agenda that would improve student outcomes. So when Senator Boyd asked the question, so Mr. Farrell and Ms. Clemens, all of our teams are working with cross-office initiatives, so that, I mean, to get to the list per se, I mean, there's not formally a list, but to your point, Senator Boyd, we do know where we have districts that have governance issues, which always, it doesn't matter if the district is a B-rated district. We've done this enough that we can tell you when those board governance issues begin to exist, in no time, you see that letter grade drop. So B districts will drop to a D district in no time, simply because they can't they can't conduct themselves professionally amongst the leadership to operate the district or the school on a day-to-day basis. So I could stand here and talk about that all day long, but I would just urge you to consider the amount of funding that we're asking for this initiative is minimal. It's $316,000. Back in 2012, we had a $500,000 budget to contract with the auditors and pay their travel. So I think this would be very important as we move forward and we work across offices collaboratively to improve outcomes in these low-performing districts, because you all know it begins with the leadership.
Senator McClenny, you're recognized for question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank you for having these hearings. I want to thank MDE for being here and being very informative. We're all that sit at this table under tremendous pressure, as you all know, for people to have more choice in their education, apparently. I witnessed this past summer. Little did I know that a national political action committee would come after me. How they got my name, I don't have a clue. But we think they spent roughly $200,000 to unseat me. So we need to have answers, that we can tell, this is why we believe in public education. So thank you for giving us the numbers on the teachers, but do we have numbers on how the administrative districts, the administrative in those districts rank in states? Do we have any numbers on how many districts we have in our state per capita per student compared to other states?
Yes, sir, we could compare that, but if you're asking if we could compare the salaries of school leaders in Mississippi to the salaries of school leaders in other states, we do not have that information.
Is that something we could get together?
We could try with some of our national clearinghouses to see if they have that information or if there's a way to request that. But to my knowledge, we've never requested that. Now, we do have the information on administrative salaries within the state, for sure. I mean, we could have that obtain that from MSIS. But yeah, but we can look at making some comparisons with the national averages for administrators.
Thank you. And going back to the 4 school districts that were what was the wording we used? Districts of transformation. 3 of those districts are counties that touch each other. Is this a regional issue that we have? Or is it a school district issue that we have?
So that's not my area, but if Dr. Evans wants to speak to that, or I could speak, I don't think it's necessarily a regional issue. I think it's a district issue because we have low performing districts all across our state and the districts that we're monitoring for governance, they're not all in one region of our state. I mean, this just happens to be the list of districts that are currently under MDE's control. But if you look at history, there's been 23 instances of state takeovers in the history of Mississippi, and they've been all across our state.
But it just so happens that 3 of these are counties that are bunched together this time.
Yes, sir.
Do you know how many students are in those 3 districts combined?
Yeah, we could get that information. Mr. Farrell, do you know, you don't know that offhand, but we could get it.
I guess what I was getting at was comparing that kind of to where I live and the onslaught that we get from our northern border is almost like those 3 counties compared going to Madison. Is the way we see it. Thank you. But if you could get those numbers because we hear all the time, how many districts do we have in the state of Mississippi compared to how many counties we have? And again, going back, we have 35,000, 36,000 kids in one county, one school district. Thank you.
Senator Norwood, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to make a statement, then I want to ask a question. I'm glad to see Department of Education, not necessarily under your leadership, Dr. Evans, but I'm glad to see Department of Education take some ownership in with the low performing districts and accountability for the amount of money that we have invested and where the money is going. Hiring those, whatever you call them, and we paying those absorbent amount of dollars to individuals. Hopefully we get a lot more bang for our bucks and accountability here. And I appreciate that move from in the conversation that we had also on that. But the 8 school districts, the 8 school boards, administrations that somewhat challenged now, and the 4 school districts that's in transformation, are they a part of that 8 or that?
No, sir. The 4 that are currently in transformation, those boards have been abolished and they report directly to the State Board of Education so that they are not in the number of the 8 districts that we're monitoring. So it's 8 districts outside of the 4 districts of transformation. And to be honest, if I didn't state it, I should have, we could be monitoring more districts than just 8. 8 just happens to be the priority number at this time as a result of capacity.
Okay, well, the structure, administrative costs per district, do we have a limit on that administrative cost per district? And do we have a structure that you have so many teachers, so many students per teacher? Do we have a structure that districts, I guess I'm talking from a top-heavy standpoint. Have we looked at the structure of the districts that may be perceived as being top heavy, and if we have administrative limit on the dollars, are they over the limit or are they paying that from some other source?
So that would be local control as far as the district administrative staff. So we don't, or to my knowledge, we've never engaged in those conversations. I mean, we recognize from our audits whether or not they're top heavy, of course, and know what those expenditures are, but because it's local control, we have no control over that. To your point about the student-teacher ratios, the law does set the minimum or gives this Commission on School Accreditation to set the minimum of the, or the maximum, not the minimum, the maximum of the student-teacher ratios. But if a local board chooses to have a form of class size reduction, they may not have, for example, the 27-to-1 to student teacher ratio in grades 1 through 4, they may opt to have a lower ratio. But again, that's local control. But the numbers for the per pupil per teacher, we do have guidelines for pre-K through 12th grade for those.
I guess I didn't make myself clear.
Oh.
I guess my point is from the dollars that's appropriated from the state, do we have administrative limit, like I guess most funds that state agencies have like a 10 or 15% limit of administration. Do we have that? And I'm not talking, if it's local control, that's fine, but I'm just saying, do we have a limit?
Well, yeah, to my knowledge, we do not set a limit, or a cap for that.
Okay.
No. But I mean, that the information is, available, for administrative costs. It's reported, on the report card, what per, pupil expenditures are, but.
Okay.
Senator
Thank you,
Norton,
Mr.
I anticipate on the 28th at our next hearing, we're going to hear from some folks to talk about more, what are administrative expenses? What should their cost be per district, per capita, for example, things like that. If I'm incorrect, I think the vast majority, if not all of the state dollars that go to districts are for teacher salaries and things like that. Most, if not all of the administrative expenses, administrators, deputy superintendents, principals, that's paid through local dollars and so forth. Would it be ideal if the department will come up and say a district of this size should have one superintendent and a deputy and, so we don't have an excess of administrators in a district? Yeah, I think they could do that. I don't know if they've been asked to do that yet, but
We've done that in the past in instances where we've had to take control of a district for financial reasons.
Okay.
And, and what we found in a number of those districts was while continually their enrollment was declining, they were not releasing staff, teachers or administrators based on that enrollment. They just continued to rehire all of the individuals till it got to a point where they couldn't make payroll because they're per
yeah,
pupil.
I'd be curious to see if we have an excess administrators, if we could put more of those administrators back into the classroom, if it would help solve or lower our teacher shortage crisis and so forth, and how does the excess of administrators compared to maybe your model, what are they in the low performing districts or the high ones or so forth? Like you said, it's local control, but I think there's got to be some data showing a correlation to something to that effect. So
We can work on
Senator
that.
Bryan has a question.
My question involves school boards, and I need to sort of explain what I'm trying to ask. When the state some years ago first started taking over local school districts, that was a huge, unprecedented step. You're taking away control of the school district from the local community, and this was the first time that had been done ever. And ultimately, the philosophy behind that was, but if a district is so bad that with all the reasons not to want to do this, there's still a need to, ultimately, the education of the students is more important. But the notion was that this would be an intervention by the state to fix the problem, and then we were anxious to turn operation of the school board back to the local district. And that mentality and that concern runs through a lot of this. I think we figured out fairly quickly that in many instances, the problem is the local leadership or lack thereof. And if you just turn things back over to the same leadership you had before, you're going to wind up right back where you were. And that tended to happen. So at one point, the traditional or the usual method was that a conservator would be the school board. And the state would appoint an advisory school board. And you'd have a school board meeting. And the conservator, acting as the school board, would sit there and make motions and on and on and on. Vote would be 1-0, and that would be that. But the purpose was to have a group of local leaders sit and understand what a school board was like. And then ultimately, when the school board, when the conservatorship was ending, the school board that had been there in that role would take over, and then ultimately the members of the board would roll off one at a time. The hope being that there had been some change in the local community, and now you had people who knew what it was like to be on the school board and on and on. I think we may be getting away from that. But one of the dilemmas in rural Mississippi, and by rural Mississippi, I mean about 70 counties, is simply leadership. And people are moving away, and there's less local leadership than there used to be. This is being reflected in many instances in the composition of school boards. You have elected school boards, and I mean, anybody can win an election. Just look around, you know, that's how we got here. And I don't know how to identify in a community leadership and get the leaders of the school board that I think we had traditionally. But that's an overwhelming problem. You mentioned the school boards that don't even talk about student performance. And in fact, the school boards need to be worried about what student performance is going to look like 5, 10, 20 years in the future. And so my question is, what are you going to do about that?
Well, in the part of what you talked about with the school boards, with the history of the interventions that we've had or takeovers, in some instances early on in the 90s with the first takeovers, we tried to work with the local boards. And then we ended up having, because they had so many governance issues, they were interfering with the agency's process of intervention. So then later, somewhere around 2010, 2011, the State Board of Education just began exercising the option in statute to abolish the school board so that the conservator, or now referred to as interim superintendent, could operate without the interference of a local board. And then as the district was reconstituted, bring on, just like you described in that process. So what we're proposing and have been working on with the School Boards Association is some standards, or like our code of ethics. May not be using the appropriate terminology, but something very similar to what we have for leaders or for educators, for licensed educators, and have a way for there to be consequences for violations of those, whether it be withholding their compensation or, removing. I mean, I know it's not really easy. There's to remove, or you can't. There's no, the only option for removing an elected board member from his or her office is during the time of these governance issues is if they are convicted of a felony. So I've been at the agency for over 20 years, and one of the boards that we were first involved with had a member that we worked with for 15 years. That was a problem with the school board. And finally, a felony was committed on that board member's behalf, and they're no longer a board member. So that's the only board member I've seen removed in all the years. So we would like some authority in statute to have consequences for school boards that don't maintain an appropriate code of conduct.
Well, apparently, anybody who's ever obtained a federally insured loan from a bank has committed a felony somewhere, so you've got that to work with. But you're talking about sins of commission. I'm talking about sins of omission, the failure to understand the long-term need to have a quality school district, to understand the need to have a good superintendent and good teachers, and understanding all of those things. That comes about not from a group of people who simply don't disobey the rules. It comes about from a group of people who have no vision.
I think that's part of the system we have. You know, we have a system set up where you can vote and for your elected officials, school board, senator, whatever. And so I don't know that there's an answer to that long term, other than to train these folks up, make them understand what a good district should look like. And that's what I think the department's trying to do with this code of ethics. That's a bill we had last year, I believe. I can't remember how far it made it, but I anticipate that coming back again. But I think it's just training, and unless you just want to upend the whole system that we have, and I don't know what you want to do.
Well, I think one of the things that has some hope, or the K to 16 organizations that involve members of the community in the school. But I also think that the state appointed school board, which eventually one by one goes off, I think there's a lot to be said for that model. And I would have, I think, a much slower rotation off. I would leave the appointed board in for a couple of years, and then maybe move one person off every 2 years or something like that, because I think you need a long-term change in culture. And the community, I think communities want their children educated. And I think if a community sees and understands this is better, and this is because among other things, we've got a better school board, that might lead to more focus on the school board in the community. Maybe this is a pipe dream, but that off the top of my head is the thing that comes to mind.
I agree with you. I think once the community sees how a successful or an effective district works, they're going to demand it in the future. And so they won't allow it to regress, or, once it is fully returned back to the local district. So, but I think it's something we definitely need to talk about for sure. So going to our last question with Senator Wiggins.
Thank you. On the list of the salaries statewide, throughout the states, does that include, in particularly Mississippi, the salaries as set out in statute, or does it include the supplements that get paid to teachers?
This is going to include the supplements that are paid,
So in other words.
not just our state minimum, not.
Okay, so in other words, where I'm looking at a Mississippi, let's say the average adjusted for cost of living 54.2, that's including the supplements that get paid to the teachers throughout
From
the
the
state.
local districts.
The local, the local supplements.
Local supplements too, do you need to? The reported wage rates with local supplements.
Okay, sorry. What's recorded wage rates? I'm just a simple lawyer.
So this is, as Dr. Vanderford mentioned, this is a federally administered survey. It is the Occupational Employment and Wage Statistics Survey. And so what they do is they use a sampling method of reported wage rates. And so the reported wage rates do include the local supplement as reported.
So just to understand further, so if one district pays a 5,000 supplement and another district pays a $1,000 supplement, it's been calculated into the numbers that we're seeing here.
As those numbers are reported, yes, it will take in those differing levels of local salary supplements.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, if I may, while we're on this, it appears to me that the average adjusted for cost of living in almost every state is below the dollar amounts. And I don't want to get into it right now, but it seems to me a very odd calculation, however we came up with the average adjusted cost of living. And what's particularly troubling about it is the one state that looks like it might be the norm would be Texas. And I would hope that's not the case for anything, anywhere, anytime.
Senator Boyd for our last questions.
A quick question on, do we have a chart that shows the percentage of local funds that each district puts in versus state funds and federal funds? Do we have a chart on that?
We could probably have that in chart form, but it's captured on the district report card. I mean, it's available on our website.
Okay,
that
but
you
we
can
don't
see
have it by district, just so that.
We could have it set up that way. I mean, we could request the data to be set up that way. for
Okay.
you.
And then do we have something that lists the average local supplement? Do we have that anywhere? Teacher supplement, just,
Teachers, not by the supplements.
okay. All right. Then the last question, I know, but back to what Senator Bryant said and back to what Senator Barr had. What we're talking about when these school boards do this is breaching a fiduciary responsibility. And so do you have the tools necessary with what we passed last year or what you're proposing this year to go in and, because we do have local home rule, do y'all have the tools that you need right now to go get these school boards that are breaching this fiduciary responsibility with their actions and what they're doing back to where they need to be?
No, currently, the way the law is written, the only ability that we have to intervene with these local boards and abolish the board is if we place them in a district of transformation, either by declaring a state of emergency or it being a financial emergency where they can't pay their bills or for the low performing. So under the statute to take them under state control, we have what we need in law, but outside of, in many of the districts that we're monitoring of the 8 that I reference, I mean, they're higher performing districts. I mean, they would not qualify unless they were in a financial crisis and couldn't meet payroll or had some life-threatening safety concern that would create a state of an emergency. We would have no ability to bring them in under our state authority and abolish the board. That's why we're needing to address,
Okay.
the training. And
All right, just years ago, experience in dealing with 16th section lands, when we would have boards that would not want to lease for the appropriate values. One of the things, I mean, we would basically have to threaten to go in with a fiduciary suit if they would not do this. Do y'all have the capacity? I realize you're trying to do this by getting the coaches along and all of that. But at the end of the day, would you like to see, or y'all going to propose to see to us that despite the remediation efforts you're making, despite these things, they're still not doing what they should be doing? Are y'all going to be proposing to us any changes in that statute to get them to do what they need to do?
yes, ma'am, we are.
Perfect.
And
Thank
they'll
you.
start with the training, the the standards of conduct, the consequences, and eventually the removal if necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions we have. We're honored to have the gentleman from Lee with us today, Representative. I'm sure by sitting over here, your IQ has jumped up probably 10 to 15 points, I imagine. So, do you have any at that table? I believe so. Hope we learned something today. And do you have any questions for anybody? Or if so, Senator Bryan has all the answers. He can take care of that for you. Dr. Evans, I'll ask you to wrap it up. We appreciate you and your team this morning and yesterday as well.
Yes, thank you. Just, again, thank you so much for your time. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about the progress that we've made, the initiatives that we have ongoing and pushing forward. Just the thing that I hope you get from this is that, we're not, as my grandfather used to say, reading our press clippings. You know, that's not how we are. That's not how I'm built. It's not how I operate, not how we operate. And just understand that we have no intentions of losing momentum. That is, the one thing I hope when you walk out of this room is that you know that we are pushing. I personally feel the full weight of everything that we've talked about. I live it every day. I know I impose that also on the people at the department, so they feel it as well. And just know that we're here to we're pushing. You know, we're not satisfied with where we are. Of course, we're the type of people that would never be satisfied with where we are. But these initiatives, in order for us to be successful, we understand the importance of the relationship with you, ladies and gentlemen, at the Capitol on both sides. We appreciate we appreciate your vision to allow us to come over here and have this conversation, because it's very important that we have the opportunity to talk to you and you have the opportunity to ask us these questions. Because when you get here and the session starts, everybody's going 10 different directions. So thank you so much for the opportunity to come here and have these conversations and know that we're willing to do the hard lifting. We just need to keep having the support that you give us. But I can assure you, we will be, we'll do the work. Y'all just continue to support us and we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. I think just wrapping up, I think these last 2 days have kind of showed how successful our educational system has come along, how far it's come along in 10 years. We're on the right track. There are minor tweaks we got to make. We're not satisfied where we're at, where there's always room for improvement, whether it's teacher pay or absenteeism or whatnot. And so as we move forward, and I'm hesitant to make any major changes in the way we operate, I think these minor tweaks are necessary. Us as legislators want it to happen yesterday. And so we're going to keep pushing you as a department to make these changes. But we're here to work with you to give you the tools that you need to help these districts. And so I appreciate the transparency of the department, the openness and the dialogue that you have with each of us, the willingness to answer the questions that we have, and providing guidance to us, letting us know when we're off track and that won't work. So keep doing what you're doing. Keep having patience with us for our questions and the tolerance that you'll need to deal with us. We know that. So thank you very much. And I appreciate the committee for coming in these last 2 days. Once again, we'll meet on the 28th. Christy will get with you. And that is all I have. So thank you very much. We are adjourned.